All right, let's jump right into a question that, well, it sounds a little strange at first, but it's absolutely fundamental to how we understand government, law, you name it. And that question is, how should we even think about the state? Is it some kind of living, breathing thing with a will, or is it more like a machine, a complex tool operated by whoever's in charge?
So let's just lay it out there. Is the state a person? And obviously, no, we're not talking about a person made of flesh and blood. That would be weird. This is a huge philosophical debate, right? It's all about ideas. It's asking if a whole society, a nation, can have a personality, a single identity, in the same way you or I do. The fancy term for this whole idea is moral personality. And really, it's the concept that the state, as this big, organized society, has its own distinct identity, a will, a purpose, and that means it can have rights and responsibilities that are totally separate from any individual ruler or citizen. It's not just the king's property or the president's company. It's its own thing.
Now, we're not just pulling this out of thin air. Our guide through this whole maze is the legal philosopher Jean Dabin. We're really digging deep into his big work, The Characters of the State, to unpack this classic debate. So what you're getting here is a distillation of his really dense but fascinating analysis.
Okay, so here's our game plan. We've just touched on the question of personality. Next, we'll look at the idea of the state as a useful fiction and then flip the coin to see the argument for it being a real entity. Then, and this is crucial, we'll see how this all ties into the sovereignty puzzle. And finally, we'll check out a possible path to resolution.
All right, so let's dig into that first big argument. This is the school of thought that says the state's personality, well, it's not real at all. It's basically just a convenient story, a useful tool.
The big name you need to know for this side of the argument is Léon Duguit, and he did not mince words. For him, the state was simply, quote, a pure abstraction. He believed there's nothing actually there except for the specific people who happen to be in charge right now.
You know, it's interesting. In Dabin's analysis, this is called the realist position. And these realists aren't saying the idea of the state is useless. Not at all. It can be an incredibly powerful tool, a legal fiction that helps organize everything. But, and this is their main point, we have to remember it's just a tool. It's a fiction, not a fact.
So why would anyone invent a fiction like this? Well, it turns out it solves some massive practical headaches. Think about it. It gives a country continuity. It means that when a king dies or a president leaves office, the country's debts and treaties don't just disappear. It takes this super messy web of real people with power and tidies it up, legally speaking. The state just becomes this perfect, simple label to make it all work. But okay, that's one side of the coin. A pretty skeptical one for sure. And it is definitely not the only argument out there. So now let's explore the powerful counter-argument. The idea that the state is way more than a fiction, that it's a real entity, more than just the sum of its parts.
And here's where the two theories really clash. The fiction theory says the state is basically a hammer, and the governors are the ones swinging it. But the reality theory, it says, no, the state is a real, collective being. It has a life and a purpose that's bigger than any single person who happens to be in charge at the moment.
So, if it is real, what makes it real? According to this theory, which Dabin really dives into, the state's reality comes from its purpose. Its whole reason for being is to serve the public good, the bonus publico. The idea is that because society has this constant real need for an institution to look out for the common welfare, the state itself becomes real. It exists because it has to exist to get that job done.
Okay, I know what you might be thinking. Person, fiction, reality, this all feels pretty academic, right? But this is where the rubber meets the road. This whole debate has massive, real-world consequences, and it all comes down to one of the most important and, frankly, most dangerous concepts in politics: sovereignty.
So what exactly is sovereignty? Well, it's ultimate power, supreme authority. It's where the buck stops. And this is the million-dollar question that this whole debate hinges on. Where does that power actually live? Who or what truly has it? And your answer to that depends completely on which side of this fiction versus reality debate you land on.
And check this out. This shows you exactly what's at stake. Let's follow the logic. 1. If the state is just a fiction, right, just a handy label for the people in charge, then, well, sovereignty has to belong to the rulers themselves. They are the power. But if the state is a real thing, a real entity, then sovereignty belongs to the state itself. And the rulers, they're not the masters. They're just temporary agents, servants, really, of the state.
This puzzle is right at the heart of what Dabin was grappling with. I mean, you can see it in the text right there. The question, what does it even mean to say the state is sovereign? It just blows open this whole can of worms. It forces you to make a choice. Is power personal, belonging to the rulers, or is it institutional, belonging to the state? And your answer to that, it changes literally everything. So, we've got two powerful, compelling arguments that seem to completely cancel each other out. Fiction on one side, reality on the other. How do you get past that? Well, this is where Dabin's work tries to find a path forward, a kind of synthesis, a practical middle ground. And the solution isn't to just pick a side. It's about shifting how we look at the problem. It's about asking, what is this idea of moral personality for? And the answer is, the state's personality isn't a pure fiction, but it's not some mystical being either. It's a necessary idea. It's a moral and legal framework we build for a single reason, to serve the public good. Its reality isn't its job.
So here's the bottom line. This whole concept matters because of the work it does. First, it sets the state's goal, serve the public good. Second, it makes rulers accountable to something bigger than their own ambition. It also gives us a stable entity for international law, and maybe most important of all, it creates a framework that's supposed to put a leash on arbitrary power.
And Dabin has this really powerful metaphor to wrap this all up. He suggests we should think of the state as an hombre honesto, an honest man. What does that mean? It means it's not just a thing with power. It's an entity that, by its very definition, is supposed to be bound by morality and justice, to its own people and to other nations.
And that brings us to the final, lingering question. Because if we accept this idea that the state is a moral entity meant to do good, but its power is always in the hands of flawed, fallible people, then who guards the guardians? If the state has a will of its own, how do we, the people, make sure that will stays honest? That's a puzzle for every single generation to solve. Thanks for joining this explainer.